Hey everyone. Please support what I do to help keep Greyhawk alive by subscribing to the channel. Also, please consider becoming a channel member to get early access to videos, exclusive live chats, quarterly adventure modules, and more. Thanks, and enjoy the show.
One of the most important things in a dungeon crawl focused RPG is the combat system, and I want to talk about Adventures Dark and Deep's combat system today on Greyhawk Grognard. So one of the things that a game like Adventures Dark and Deep, really wants to do well is combat. And even though the combat system in this game is based on the combat system from First Edition Dungeons and Dragons, it is necessarily different. Um, the First Edition AD&D combat system was a bit convoluted, and some things didn't make sense, and they didn't emphasize things that I liked to be emphasized and so on. So I kind of rejiggered it around. It's not too far removed, and it's certainly backwards compatible. Like you could use an AD&D module with Adventures Dark and Deep, and the changes to the combat system won't impact it at all. Everything scales the same. The weapons will translate perfectly. It's not that's not the issue. It's more some of the other stuff, which I'm going to go through the outline of combat. So in a combat encounter, let's say there's an encounter, a group of orcs and a group of PCs meet in a corridor, and neither of them was expecting the other. First thing you do, roll for surprise. Surprise is done using a d6, and each side rolls. So surprise is not individual. Surprise is side by side. So the monsters roll a d6, and the PCs roll a d6. The higher the roll, the more you've surprised the other guy. So if the monsters, for example, roll a 6 and the PCs roll a 3, the PCs are surprised. And how that manifests itself is they get an initiative penalty in the round. So in that case, you subtract the one from the other, and they add 3 to their initiative. We'll get to initiative in a second. Now, there are a couple of exceptions, obviously. Some creatures or classes, like rangers, for example, will roll a d8 instead of a d6, and that means you have you have a much better chance of surprising an enemy. There are, of course, other adjustments here and there, as you would expect, but that's the meat of it. D6, D6, compare, and whoever rolls highest, the other guy, and whoever rolls lowest, I should say, gets a penalty to their initiative. And if both sides roll over a 2, then there's no impact at all. So it's really, if you roll a 1 or a 2, you're going to have um, a potential adjustment to your initiative. So that is surprise. And I just want to pause for a blatant commercial announcement, just to remind everybody that the Kickstarter for the Adventures Dark and Deep Core Rules is going on right now. It ends this Thursday night. So please, if this sounds interesting to you, go check it out. The link will be below. The more money we raise, the more and better art we can do. And I might just be able to sneak in those action cards. So now, next up, you declare your action. Notice you're doing this before you roll initiative. You're declaring what is your character going to do. Obviously, the GM just keeps it in his mind, or you could say, "Oh, they're going to attack" or whatever. But the PCs, you go around the table. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And in Adventures Dark and Deep, there are a number of actions that you could choose from. So there is attack hand to hand, which means you're going to try to punch or kick or grapple somebody. We'll get to grappling and pummeling in a bit. There's melee attack, which means you're going to take a swipe at him with your sword or whatever. There is missile attack, so you're going to shoot at him with your bow. Next up, you can charge, which means you move double your speed and you can attack at the end of the charge. You can do that once per turn, so once every 10 rounds. And basically, there's some modifiers that happen, and there's a chance that the guy you're charging at will get an attack first, depending on a couple of things. But basics are you're moving really fast and you're attacking the other guy, and then you get some adjustments based on that, adjustments to your initiative and so forth. Next up, you want to close. That means you're just going to move your regular movement and then you end the round and you can attack in the following round. No adjustments or anything. You're just saying, okay, I'm over here, I'm moving over here, and now I can attack you next round. Simple. You can defend. This is a thing. Um, and when you choose to defend, you're not attacking, but you get a +2 bonus to your armor class. Boom, just like that. Um, if and this is one of those circumstances where if somebody's charging at you, you can attack, because if you're defending and somebody charges at you, you get an attack that round even though you're defending, and if you hit, you do double damage because he's barreling towards you, and you're sitting there ready for him, and then you just skewer him. You can also try to disengage. Disengage means if you're in melee with somebody, then you get to move away from that person, and you're not going to, next round you won't be in melee with them anymore. When you do that, the enemy gets a +2, gets an automatic attack and gets a +2 to hit when you're leaving. That's all. Um, Next up, magic, and this is kind of a catch-all if you're going to cast a spell or use a magic item or drink a potion or whatever. You can't be in melee to do this, and this basically is just how how spellcasters and everybody else can do that if you're going to do something that doesn't involve combat or moving. Then there's maneuver. Maneuver is you're just going to move from here to here, and you're not in combat with anybody at any time. So, while other people are off doing stuff and attacking each other and casting spells and everything, you're just going, shoot, I'm over here now. Then there's a catch-all, other, because it's D&D, and no system like this um, is going to be able to handle every single instance. So, I threw in an other as a catch-all. Now, one of the things about these combat actions is that each one starts and ends with, um, are you in melee or not? So, for example, uh, for magic, you have to start the round not in melee. You can end the round either in melee or not in melee, because um, let's say you cast your spell and then somebody goes on their initiative and attacks you. You're in melee at that point, but your spell's already gone off. That's how the initiative works, which we'll get to next. Something like attack melee. You have to start the round in melee, and you end the round in melee unless you've killed the guy. Um, and in melee has a very specific definition here. It means that you are in close combat with somebody else. It could be a monster, it could be an NPC, it could be an orc, whatever. And it could be with a hand weapon or hand to hand. But either way, you are you're close enough that you can't get away without giving him an attack. That's in melee. And that's the actions. You choose one of these at the beginning of the round, and you hang on to it. What I might do is make up a set of cards, so that as you're playing the game, you have your cards here, and you just pick one, and then as you go, you lay down the card just as an optional. You wouldn't need that. It'd be a fun little thing to do, I think. Okay, next up is initiative. Now, initiative works differently in Adventures Dark and Deep than it does in Dungeons and Dragons. Um, the way it works here, I think, is much more intuitive, and at the table, it really flows very well. I've been using this for years, and once the players grok it, they will immediately, it'll just go. It'll go great. So for initiative, once you've decided your attack, your combat action, you roll initiative. You roll a d10. Um, and that tells you what segment in the round you're going to go in, because each segment is 6 seconds. There are 10 segments in a round, so you roll a d10 to see when you're going to go. Now, to this d10, you add a number of modifiers. If you're surprised, you add that modifier. If you have a high dexterity, you subtract that modifier from your initiative roll. If you're using different kinds of magic, you either add the spellcasting time in segments. So, if you have a spell that takes 2 segments to cast, you add 2. Very simple. If you're going to do a potion, it's +2 to 5. You do it randomly. That's one of the exceptions. If you're using like a rod or something, it's 3 segments. That kind of thing. So you just add those things. You add your weapon speed. This is where weapon speed comes. And yeah, I am well aware that Gary didn't use weapon speed in his games. I know that. This is one of those times when I deviated from what Gary was doing and what he intended. I just think it works better, and that's how it goes. Speed comes into play, and it sounds really awkward. Oh my god, what do you mean I have to know my weapon speed? It's just like knowing how much damage your weapon does. You put it on your character sheet. You're only going to have two or three or four weapons at most. So you just look on your sheet. What's your number? Oh, I'm using this kind of weapon. I add 4 to my initiative. Okay, move on. Again, in combat at the table, it really goes quickly. There's a couple of little other modifiers too. Um, uh, if you're unarmed and you're attacking somebody with a weapon, you go a little faster. You go a little slower. That kind of thing. But on the whole, that's it. There's a couple of set modifiers. Weapon speed or spellcasting time is 90% of what you're going to use. And then you roll. And then during the round, the DM starts counting. Segment 1, segment 2, segment 3. I go. You do whatever your thing, whatever your action was. 4, 5. I go. 6. The orc goes. 7, 8, I go, and you get to 10 because that's the end of the round. Now, because of the modifiers, it's very possible that somebody will be going on like segment 12 or 15 or whatever. All that stuff just piles up at the end. So it all is assumed to happen in that last segment of the round. It doesn't spill over into the next round or anything crazy like that. So the round happens in order of initiative, and you add those couple of modifiers and you just count up, and then boom, you're good. Now, in a couple of circumstances, if you get like multiple attacks per round and stuff like that, there's a couple of special cases like that. But those are spelled out in here, and it, as I say, at the table, it works great. And then for combat damage, it works pretty much like you would expect. Each weapon does a certain amount of damage. You roll, boom. That's all you need to know. Um, there is an unarmed combat system, and it works very differently than it does in first edition. Good, I'm sure all of you are saying, because in first edition they had this wacky, 3 different subsystems, each using percentages that had nothing to do with the regular combat system. Oh my god, it was a freaking nightmare. Um, Unarmed combat in Adventures Dark and Deep is very simple. You can pummel, overbear, or grapple, and it works just like regular combat. You roll a d20, you go in the regular initiative, you roll a d20. There are a couple of modifiers to hit based on different things and what you want to do. And depending on what you're doing, you'll either cause damage if you're pummeling, you will knock somebody down if you're overbearing, or you will hold on to them if you're grappling. And that's pretty much it. And obviously there's going to be some corner cases again with like different kinds of monsters. Oh, I want to grapple the uh, the the green slime or whatever. Who the hell knows? But it's as a rule, the unarmed combat system here works much smoother and it feels much more organic because it is built into the regular combat system. It's just another option in combat. And then there is morale. At the end of each round, the game master should just, in the back of his mind, keep, is it likely that there's going to be a morale check? Obviously, PCs never check morale, but except if they're magically, there could be some magical fear or something like that, but that's different. Um, if you've lost a quarter of your force and then you've lost half of your friendlies, if your leader is incapacitated, like the orc chieftain is killed or whatever, then that'll cause a morale check, and you roll a d20. And if it's 10 or less, you fail morale, and those people leave. There's some modifiers. Um, you know, if your side has been inflicting a lot of casualties without suffering any, there's a bonus. If your leader gets blocked, there's a penalty. Things like that. But generally speaking, the whole point is you don't necessarily want every monster to fight to the death, which is what a lot of people do, and it really loses something, and it turns combat into more of a grind. Because if you're faced off against a dozen kobolds, and you're just sitting there, oh my god, we gotta kill more kobolds. Let's just keep rolling. But after 2 or 3 rounds, it's obvious that the kobolds are going to lose, so they break morale and they just take off. Then you could pursue them or whatever. That gives you a choice. They could surrender. So you have prisoners that you have to deal with, and you could interrogate if you speak kobold, that kind of thing. But I really do emphasize in the rules that you really should use the morale system, because it does make it a little less of a grind, and it does make it a little more realistic and a little more fun. It opens up more possibilities. If you're going to chase the kobolds back to their lair, or if the ogres went that way, so we're going to go this way. There's a lot of opens up a little bit better. And again, everything fighting to the death just doesn't make it a lot of sense, and it doesn't make a good game most of the time. So that's why I recommend highly using the morale. And there are a couple special conditions, like if you're prone or if you're pinned or stunned or whatever. And there's a couple modifiers for that. But I try not to go overboard with that. I don't want to go into, this whole condition centric combat system like 5th edition has. But there are some things, that it makes sense if your arms are pinned against your sides. You're not going to be able to do what you might otherwise do. But that's it. And that's pretty much the combat system. I like it. I think it's very straightforward. I've used it for many years in practice. I think it works very smoothly. It will take a little getting used to for a new player, but after a couple of rounds of combat, you'll get it, and you'll know exactly what's going on. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this peek behind the curtains, and please do consider supporting the Kickstarter. It ends in a couple of days, and hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will talk to you.
Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store where you can buy my books, and my blog where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.